gamers? It is your boy, Golden12, back with another Genshin Impact video. Today I'm going to show you how to use Sara. Now this may seem a little bit weird and, well, I don't know how to explain it. This isn't going to be like a typical guide, I just sort of want to explain how the character works, pretty simply and show off a little bit. So, firstly, Sara, right? We're going to start with the weapons, right? The weapons you want is pretty much Skyward Harp. Now there are a lot of other options, right? But what you're looking for is the highest base attack you can possibly get on your Sara. So if you're going for 4 stars, I would personally recommend Blackcliff. The Blackcliff one. Now there are a few other ones work, but Blackcliff, it's got high base attack and crit, and you're gonna want that on this character for sure. So yeah, that's pretty much your best 4-star option. Best 5-star option is gonna be Skyward Heart, but again, if you have any 5-star option, you probably want it due to its high base attack, and we'll get into that in a second. In terms of artifact stacks, you have a variety of options. I prefer Full Peace Noblesse because I'm using her as a full buffer, and this is also a way to, get really high damage on her. And you can also do 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Thundering Fury. You can do full Thundering Fury if you are relying, on the team comp with like Electro Charge and want the decreased skill cooldown, which can come in useful, in some cases, right? Or you can do 2-piece Thundering Fury, 2-piece Noblesse, full Glad, or not full Glad, sorry. 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Shumanawas, or 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Thundering Fury. Like, there's a variety of options, although for the most part you're going to maximize damage. Now you can additionally run Emblem of Severed Fate, right? You can run this if you want to maximize her ult damage, although I don't think it's worth it because not only is you're building a ton of energy recharge, which yes, it will be good for her because she has a high cost ult. In most cases, since wanting to buff other characters, you probably don't want this over like the other set, right? You just want to get out your damage and then swap to the other character, which is why I'm using Noblesse specifically. But this is still a very good option if you have ER on here. Now Constellation should go over in a second, but talents is what's next. The auto attack. Auto attack, you're not really leveling up, but you're because it's kind of low modifiers, right? The main point of this character is the E skill and ult, which the E skill is going to give you an attack bonus based off of her base attack, right? Attack bonus ratio, and it has a duration of 6 seconds, cooldown of 10. The ultimate, and this is important, this ultimate gives the same buff as the E, right? It gives the exact same buff as the ultimate, right? The ultimate gives the same buff as E. Now the ultimate is going to hit once for a large amount of damage, and it's going to go out to 4 what I'm going to call chains, right, of lightning that each hit 6 times. Now once you get C4, it will go out to 6 chains that each hit 6 times, increasing the damage by a pretty good amount. 80 cost, 20 cooldown. Now this constellation right here will be very helpful for a lot of players using this character, because what you do is you use the E skill, and then you have to aim and shoot the ground or a target to have the Crow Feather be put on the ground, and so you can go up to it and get the buff. Now, additionally, if the target is in the air, the Crow Feather will drop to the ground, and you can still pick up the buff. Your next passive is Decorum, I think that's how you pronounce it. Whenever you hit with the ambush, which is the explosion that happens from the E skill, right? She will restore 1.2 energy for all party members, for every 100 energy she has, right? Which is okay, but the problem with that is it's such a little amount, and you have to build so heavily into recharge, which is why the one set, Emblem of Severed Fate, is viable, especially if you build highly in energy recharge. Although I find running full Noblesse to be better. Now then, for constellations. Actually, before we get into constellations, I need to explain the E skill, because some people may be confused on this, right? Using the E skill, now here's a little problem with her. Her E skill is kind of iffy on how it works, right? The E skill is supposed to teleport you back. Sometimes it doesn't, but I'll show you in a second. So there it did, right? And at least that Crow Feather on the... Actually, no, sorry. That was the C2 and work, but yes. You use the E skill, and now look. She has feathers flying around her, and her arm is glowing, which means you're in the Crow Feather state, and you can shoot the buff into a specific location, right? And it has that AoE explosion after a delay. The reason why that's important is because you want to angle... Well, you saw right there, it didn't work, right? But the reason why that's important is you want to angle the buff somewhat near you, right? The initial hit's just going to do the bow damage, but the delayed explosion is the damage from the E skill, right? And the reason why that's important because you want to angle the buff at least somewhere close enough to you to where you can go up to get it. Right? It'll explode, and as long as you're within that explosion radius, you will get the buff. Another thing that's important about this is since it does have a delay, you're able to swap characters and receive the buff. Now my Shogun has a lot more attack, right? And so yeah, that's the E skill. Now, what you're seeing happen every time I do teleport is a Crow Feather, right? The reason why that is happening is the C2. So now I'll get into the constellations. C1 gives you a cooldown every time, or not every time, but after 3 seconds of getting the buff, right? And this is very nice because what you're able to do is actually, get the buff after using it and you get a double skill cooldown. This is pretty good for the rotations, especially if you're on Sara. And so yeah, that is definitely a pretty good constellation. C1. C2 leaves a weaker Crow Feather whenever you press the E skill, right? Meaning you can instantly swap out instead of having to shoot the ground, right? This one does do less damage though. So as you saw, right, I press it and I can immediately swap out and get the buff on a different character. No shooting required. So yeah, C2, pretty nice. C3 is just more ult scaling. C6 will give you 2 more additional chains on the ult. Now, I don't have the ult ready, so I can't really show that. But I will show it in a second once I hop into Abyss. C3 is just more scaling, so again, these are very valuable because you get higher scaling on the damage buff if you do get that. And then C6, anyone who has the buff, right, that does electro damage, right? The electro damage that character does while having the buff has its crit damage increased by 60%. Huge for characters like Raiden. Alright. Now that I've explained that, hopefully you understand, and hopefully that example helps you, especially with understanding that, well, her E skill's a little weird and doesn't always activate like it's supposed to. But whenever you teleport, you're still within range of the buff, right? The one that gets placed from the C2. But yeah. As I go into Abyss, right, the typical rotation for her is you pop her out, right? This is with Noble S. The typical rotation is you pop her out, activate the ultimate, swap to a character, because as you'll see here, the damage from the ult, not damage, but the chains that spawn from the ult give the same buff as her E skill. And it's within a certain radius. Now the radius is kind of a small size, but this is going to be more important on characters like Raiden. You can see here as I use the ult, right, I can swap and each one of these chains give the buff. And it does some pretty good damage, once she actually gets the buff and everything, but I'm just simply going to kill everything with Xiangling. Hopefully generate some energy with Sara. But yes, this is just hopefully so people understand how effective Sara really is and if they're confused at all, how she works. But it's actually pretty simple. All I gotta do, especially if you have C2, right, it makes it easier. All I gotta do is press E skill and then shoot anywhere. Now I'm getting slapped up, but you should be able to understand it by this point. There you go, this is the explosion. Now I have the ult again. I can swap, receive the buff on Raiden, but sorry, does so much damage, most things are dead. But yeah. Hopefully this helps anyone who is confused on how she works. She is very strong, alright? Do not underestimate this character. And again, I suggest leveling her because she will be helpful for a lot of teams. I will state though, her buff, if both characters are completely maxed out, her and Bennett will, from my understanding, give a higher damage buff, right? If they're completely maxed out. That's perfectly okay, right? We can't have 20, Bennetts running around Genshin Impact. Then it wouldn't really be balanced, would it? Doing a little bit of showcase of overload on Raiden. It's unfortunate her stuff doesn't work on shields, though. It really is. But yeah, hopefully this guide helps a little bit and shows you, practical application of Sara's abilities. And yeah, see you in the next one.